Right, guys, I am back. I know I've been away a long time. Sorry about that. But let's get going with this unit for higher tier paper for my year 11s. Before we get going, shout out to FR Rowdy. That's done. Let's get going. So, a gardener builds a compost heap from posts and wire. He's going to use it to recycle dead plant materials from his garden. The wire around the heap lets in air. Explain why increasing the amount of air entering the increases the rate of decay. So straight away, we're straight in with the topic, which is decay, and we should be thinking, right, why does increasing the amount of air increase the rate of decay? We should realise that increasing the amount of air obviously increases the amount of oxygen, and that will be passed to the microbes within it, which do respiration. And there you go, 2 marks. Bosh, let's get going. Right, on to the next question. Dead plant material contains elements. These include carbon and nitrogen. Explain why nitrogen is needed for plant growth. Okay, so again, you should be thinking about what a plant would need nitrogen for, and you should come to the conclusion that plants need nitrogen because nitrogen makes amino acids. And amino acids are used to make protein. More importantly, enzymes. Sweet, 2 down, let's keep going. Right, so when dead plants decay, the compost heap gets warmer than the surrounding air. This is because decaying organisms are giving off heat. The graph shows the temperature of 3 different compost heaps, A, B, and C. Now the question's on the other page, but the question is you need to compare the decay in A to the decay in C. So you can obviously see that A goes very quickly and finishes very quickly, whereas C goes a bit slower and continues. Okay, the temperature in A is a lot higher than C. Now, all you need to say to get your 2 marks for this is that the decay in A is faster, is 1 mark, and then the second mark is to say that it finished quicker. And there's your second mark, 2 marks out of 2. So easy on that one, guys. It's giving you all the answers in this graph, and all you have to do is put into words. Okay? Brill. So that's the question we've just done. Scientists have found the plant material decays slower if it contains much more carbon than nitrogen. They can measure the ratio of carbon to nitrogen. Here are some of the ratios. Okay, and so now it's asking us, compost heap A, B, and C contain different plant materials, and we've got to work out which one's which. So if you look at the carbon to nitrogen ratios, you can see that the grass clipping has got the closest carbon to nitrogen ratio, so it'll be the quickest with A. Sawdust has got the biggest difference, and so that's going to be the slowest with C. And then straw is in the middle, and so that's going to be B. And that's another mark. On we go to the 6-mark question. So we've got a group of students that have visited the seashore, and they've looked at all the different organisms that live on the seashore, depending on whether on the upper, the mid, or the lower shore. They've also marked on this kite diagram the thicker these bars, so the thicker this is, the more of that organism that lives there. So obviously, as we can see, that these just straight lines will mean that there's none of that organism that lives there. But then the wider bars give us an idea that more organisms live there. So let's have a little look at what the question is. Write down what the students can conclude from the data and how they could explain the distribution. Okay, so just like we always do, we're going to just leave you, you're going to pause me, and you are going to take 5 minutes, just write some ideas down, write down what you might answer this question with, and we're going to go through the mark scheme in a minute. So pause me now. Brill, well done, guys. So let's have a little look at what the mark scheme actually is. So here it is. As usual, the mark scheme is split into 2. So on the left-hand side, it tells us that how to get you into a level 1, 2, or 3 answer. And then on the right-hand side, it gives us a little bit guidance as to those answers. So let's just look at the level 3 answer, because obviously we're all shooting for between 5 and 6 marks on these. You can see that your answer is going to include more than one conclusion on the abundance or distribution of the organisms. And, so that's a key thing, and you need to explain one of these conclusions in detail, okay? So they do look at your spelling, your punctuation, and your grammar as well, but like just try to keep that nice and tight. And then they look at some of your science stuff. So let's have a little look at what conclusions you could say, and they're a bit easier than you would have thought initially. So, for one of your explanations could be just, conclusions could be each organism is growing at a particular area of the shore. So just the fact that you can see that there's zones where different animals live. Another marking point could be some organisms are more abundant than others, which is quite clear on the diagram. You could have some live over wider ranges, or you could have more species in the mid-shore. Okay, so there's 4 really easy conclusions. You only need 2 of them to get full marks here. The explanation's a little bit trickier. Okay, so a high-level explanation, if we just look at the lower ones, the level 2 explanation is very simplistic. Distribution is caused by the tide, or some organisms adapt to drier or wetter conditions, so it's not quite 100% there, that's why it's a level 2. Whereas if we look at the level 3 ones, we've got organisms further up the shore will be uncovered for longer periods of time, so that's kind of making sense of that. We've also got reference to the photosynthetic organisms being too deep underwater, so limited light. So on the lower shore, you're not going to get so many photosynthetic organisms because they're not going to get as much light to do photosynthesis. And then the last one would be reference to different predators and food availability and that kind of stuff. So there it is. So different predators, food availability, and competition at different parts of the shore. And that's why we've got different organisms going in different abundancies in different places on the shore. Okay, and that's our 6 marker done. Actually, a really nice, easy 6 marker for you guys, that one. On we go. So, a cell from a green leaf is placed on a microscope slide. On the slide, there is water containing bacteria. The bacteria move to the areas where there is the most oxygen. Different colours of light are shone at different parts of the cell. The diagram shows the cell viewed under a microscope. So quite a complicated story to start us off with. But all we've got to really think about is that these little dots here are attracted, tells us bacteria to move areas attracted to the most oxygen. We've got a plant cell that's obviously going to be doing photosynthesis, and we're shining different lights at it. So we can start thinking about that. Obviously, we should be thinking about the fact that photosynthesis produces oxygen, and so, yeah, we'll kind of come to that again in a minute. So what type of leaf cell was used in the experiment? And nice, easy, multiple choice question. We should not be getting these wrong. And of course, it is a palisade mesophyll. There it is, okay? Explain why the bacteria have moved to the areas shown in the diagram. So, we can start talking about, obviously, why those bacteria have moved to those areas. So quite a range of available marks here. I mean, so you can talk about the fact that bacteria have moved close to the chloroplast. Moved to the chloroplast. You could also talk about the fact that oxygen is being produced by the chloroplast. You could talk about bacteria have moved to where the photosynthesis is occurring. You could also say bacteria have moved to the lit side of the cell. All of these will get you 1 mark each, up to a maximum of 2 marks. To get the 3rd mark, you need to start talking about what's happening regarding to the lights. Okay, so if you just said the blue and the red light have a higher rate of photosynthesis, then that's your 3rd mark. You could also say that green light is not absorbed well or is reflected by the green plant. And yeah, there's your 3 marks. So again, it's quite an easy marks here. Remember, this is a higher tier paper, but we're getting some really easy marks. On we go. So, some farmers grow sugar beet plants in their fields. Sugar beet makes sugar by photosynthesis. Sugar is stored in swollen roots. Cells in the sugar beet plant need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. Leaves of the plant are adapted to allow carbon dioxide to reach these cells. Explain how. So I'm afraid our easy questions have ended here. This is a tricky one. But there are 4 available marks, or 4 available points you could make for the 3 marks, okay? So for 1, you could say that it's thin to allow short distance for diffusion. Another one could be that it's got a stomata or stoma, which can open. If this makes no sense to you, make sure you revise the structure of the plant leaf. Again, air spaces. Okay, and then you could also have broad leaves. Yeah, so those are 4 points. You only need 3 of them to get full marks on there. On we go, nearly there. Farmers grow sugar beet plants in large fields. They try and stop weeds growing in between the sugar beet plants. One way to do this is by adding chemicals to kill the weeds. Explain why removing weeds makes sugar beet plants grow bigger. So really easy question, this one, guys. All you need to say is what those weeds would be taking away from the sugar beets. So if you take those weeds out, it's going to have more, there's 4 things that you could say: more water, more light, more space, and more minerals. Just 2 of them and you'll get your marks. Last page then, guys. On some types of farms, sugar beet is only grown every other year. Barley or soybeans are grown 1 year, followed by sugar beets the next year. Put a tick in the box next to the name of this type of farming method. Okay, so you should be thinking, what are they doing? And of course it is crop rotation. Last question then. Some farmers think that the size of the sugar beet crop depends on whether barley or soybeans were grown in the fields the previous year. They think that the effect on the sugar beet is only due to the different chemical used on the barley or soybean. The farmers look at some data to investigate this. Do the results back up the farmer's ideas? Explain your answer. So let's have a little look. So barley with no chemicals, we get 22.1. Barley with ronite gets 22.2, so no massive difference there. Soybeans with no chemicals gives us 19.2. Soybeans with triflan gives us 17.4. So we can obviously conclude that the soybean, this triflan chemical that they're using, has decreased the size of the sugar beets. The ronite chemical that they're using hasn't. But we can also conclude that barley affects the size of the sugar beets less than soybeans does. So soybeans might be the culprit for lowering the size of the crop yield, as well as the chemical used on soybeans. So loads of marking points there, but if you put something that I just said down, you'll get your 2 marks. So you get more after growing barley. You could also say that ronite, which is the chemical they use with the barley, does not affect it. You could also say that chemical used on soybeans reduces the yield. So we could see that triflan reduces yield. And yeah, and all those marking points. You could also talk about the reduction in yield after growing soybeans is not just due to the chemical. So like I said, this number is obviously less than that number, so we know that soybeans are going to affect it more than barley are. Alright, hope that's been useful, guys. Make sure you're watching it. You have only got 43 days before your exam, and so it is really, really important. And remember, stay classy.